Good evening and welcome to City of Pasco special meeting and regular workshop. The council thanks you for being part of the city government. At special meetings, the council takes formal action on specific items and during the workshops only discusses issues with no formal action taken. Agenda packets are available on the City of Pasco's website at www.pasco-wa.gov/agenda. This meeting is also being televised live on PSC-TV channel 191 on Spectrum Cable in Pasco and Richland and is streamed on the city's Facebook page, website, YouTube channel, and GoToWebinar. This and previous council meeting video is available on the city's website. Lastly, the public may submit their comments and or questions by contacting city manager, city clerk, or by using the Ask Pasco app. And with that, can I get a roll call, please?
Yes. Council members Brown,
Present.
Campos,
Present.
Milne,
Present.
Roach, present, Serrano,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, Mayor Barajas.
Present. And with that, would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will be starting with the special agenda, and we do have our first item, public hearing continued, Jubilee Foundation right-of-way vacation. Public hearing continued from February 6th and February 21st, and we do have a recommendation to again continue. Correct? We have Director White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, the staff recommendation is that this right-of-way vacation be continued until either a plat is received and approved or successful work with the applicant can occur to mitigate adverse effects on neighboring properties.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And being that Mayor Pro Tem Maloney is connected remotely, this time around, if you've noticed, I've given all the council members a turn to present motions, and this time around it is Councilman Milne's turn to present the motion. So if you could present your motion, please.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I like to make a motion to continue the request to vacate rights of way in Washington addition up to Pasco in the vicinity of East A Street and East Helena Street to a date after approval of the preliminary plat for the properties in question or until such time as adverse impacts to adjoining properties can be mitigated. That's motion B, by the way.
There's a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Brown. All those in favor say aye. We can have discussion. There's a motion. It's been seconded. Do you want to wait for the motion to carry and then present your discussion?
No, I mean, I guess at this point, I can move to have the motion rescinded. I think there's some viable questions here that we've not discussed before taking action. We had a presentation by staff of a motion. There were two on the table. So, I mean, if the preference is that I move to stop the motion, typically we'll do a motion second, then we sometimes have discussion, but whatever your preference is, Mayor.
Was there, I didn't hear an actual vote and a call of the vote, so it sounds like that motion is still alive. So if you want to move to discussion right now, I think that's appropriate. Okay. If you'd like to discuss it right now.
There's a motion, there's a second, and I'll open it for discussion. Councilman Brown, do you have a comment? Councilman Serrano.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my question here, I've seen the basis here, but we've moved this twice. Have we heard from the applicants as to whether or not there are any impacts by moving this further down the road? Do we anticipate there will be any impacts? If so, what are those? You know, I know last week we had this conversation about PMC, Pasco Municipal Code 12.40. It's a very, it's probably one that we want to look at and revise at some point. I mean, I think what's most confusing where we got hung up was the code itself said we may require, but there was no absolute requirement. And then there were options that were not clearly delineated as mandatory preconditions to waiving. At least that's how I read the PMC. I spent the time to reread it. So I think from the one element, we move from whether or not compensation is required. That's no longer addressed in either of these. And again, my main concern here is we're pushing this now further down the road. We need this type of housing in Pasco desperately. So is there going to be an impact in delaying this project further to the applicant? And since the public hearing, as I understand, is still open, if the applicant's here, you know, if the staff's not prepared to answer that, we may want to have that opinion, if any.
Sure. So there's a couple issues going on here. There was the issue with relation to the requirements that were necessary to be able to waive the title report, appraisal, and compensation. There was some confusion. The ordinance was drafted not waiving those, and Mr. White, there was some confusion about what the ordinance was supposed to say. We've subsequently figured that out. I think we've got that addressed going forward. So that's really kind of an ancillary issue with regard to the vacation. The current issue is that the requirements to actually approve the vacation don't appear to be currently met. So being able to come back to you with an ordinance that you could actually pass, which would meet your requirements for a street vacation to be able to be in the benefit of the community and the other requirements that are in the agenda report, we could go through those. But currently, it doesn't sound like Mr. White is under the impression that he could draft or we could draft an ordinance and bring back to you that would actually meet those requirements.
Okay. And again, I think my primary concern is this is now several times we've seen it before us. In the event that the applicant is under a time concern, are we even addressing that as a staff?
Well, I also want to be clear that a street vacation is not any kind of quasi-judicial specific action related to an applicant. It is the streets and right-of-ways are the cities they are their property right, and you can give up that property right, but that is a pure legislative action. So that's why this public hearing really isn't like our other public hearings that require us to open, close, and then go ahead and respond back to that. This is a situation where this is a legislative public hearing that only requires council to go through this process, and it's a pure legislative decision about whether you, as the governing body of the city of Pasco, decide to relinquish a property right in a right-of-way.
Okay. I appreciate that conversation. I still think, I'm just concerned that we're continually delaying this. And that's what I just want to ensure that our customer service is adequate.
And I might add, Councilman Serrano, that I have discussed this with the applicant. I've also discussed this with one of the adjoining property owners, and I think that the motion and second is appropriate, and there will be practical delays, but I think those can be mitigated in some manner.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Just a quick one. Director White, I see in the notes, in the discussion section where am I at? I think bullet 3. The proposed vacation would likely have an adverse impact. All the language is there. Is it fair to tag on with Pete and looking at a timeline here? What is that going to look like? It's not in here. I know you had the conversation. That's great, but it's not in here. So that timeline and the effect that it could possibly have, I think that's the weird part for me. I'm good with moving forward. My motion is that this is all going to be fixed and worked out. Follow me?
I do. I wish I could promise that.
Okay.
I think we're on the right path. We're meeting practically, timeline speaking, we're meeting with the applicant this coming Thursday. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
This is Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Can you hear me?
Councilman Maloney, can you turn
Yeah.
up your sound a little bit?
I'm not sure. I will do my best. I will speak loudly for right now, and I'll see if I can adjust that at all. So just real quickly, if I understand correctly, philosophically, Mr. Ferguson, this is, in essence, if we can't waive the appraisal and such, we have to sell the right of way to the applicant or to the developer, and then that'd be sort of thing. Is because we're talking about gift of public property, right? That's a concern at hand. That's leading us down this path.
So there's two different things going on here. So the first thing is they have to meet the conditions to actually be able to have the city council be able to relinquish the right of way to vacate it. It is a little confusing because we're using the term applicant, which is really inaccurate in the sense that this is really just someone petitioning the city council to be able to relinquish that right of way for other reasons that generally benefit the city of Pasco. So once you can do that, then you can go forward with that process. With regard to whether the title report, appraisal, and compensation can be waived, there are certain requirements that are necessary to be able to do that. And once you make those findings, that's how you are able to avoid any of the issues with regard to gifting, so that you're able to come back and make those findings in your final ordinance, which is ironically the confusion that we had last week. Those issues weren't actually addressed in the ordinance, so being able to waive those wasn't feasible.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from council? Seeing none, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor of option B, to continue the request, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
There's 6 yes, 1 no. Thank you for that. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda. Item B, resolution number 4311, process water reuse facility, PWRF draft processor wastewater treatment agreement. Director Worley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. You may recall this. We discussed this last week. And there's been a lot of activity since our meeting last week. I think you may recall that at last week's meeting, we received 2 letters from a couple of our processors. And we did receive another one today from a third processor, so I can share that with you tomorrow. Last week, after receiving those letters and after the council meeting, I met with 2 of the processors that sent letters, and we walked through each of the different issues that they talked about and tried to address them as much as we could. And I think a lot of clarification was provided. There was an additional option that came up during our discussion, an identification of some additional lands that we could look at for possible expansion of our land treatment system. And based on that, we had our consultants take a look at that option. It's an additional 1,175 acres that is, people might be interested in receiving water on the other side of Smith Canyon. So our consultants quickly evaluated the cost of that particular system and what the reduction in nitrogen removal might be for that amount of land. And we think that based on the numbers that we've seen, again, that was just preliminary because we wanted to try to address it quickly before tonight. It looks like that would be a more expensive option than what is currently proposed. We also had a chance last week to talk to the Department of Ecology about the status of the facility plan approval for what is being proposed for the Phase 3 project. And based on that discussion, it looks like Ecology is willing to approve the facility plan based on what is proposed. There will be one caveat added to that about they are going to require a total dissolved solid requirement to be placed on it, but they're going to give us several years to figure out a way to meet that new requirement. So it's not something that has to be done immediately. And then we also coordinated with our financial consultant, FCS, and we asked them to run several different scenarios related to these other options. We're looking at one option where if a processor decided to reduce their BOD levels to about half, how would that impact the cost to them, the revenues to them from the renewable natural gas credits, and what the impacts might be to all of the other processors. So the other one we're looking at is we've had requests to reduce some of the storage volumes that we're planning for the phase 2. And so we're going to be looking at the reduced cost of those and how that might bring the cost of the project down as well. So a lot of activity. Last night I sent out a memo that summarized most of this or all of it. Unfortunately, I didn't give our processors a lot of time to review it since it just went out last night. And so there's a lot of them here tonight. So hopefully they'll be able to share with us their thoughts and comments about that. And the final thing that I'll add is that we do have a congressional directed spending request form going in tomorrow that's due, and it is for the processed water reuse facility. This is for Senator Murray's office. We do have another one for Senator Cantwell's office in a few weeks, and then there will be another one for Representative Newhouse's office after that. This is a very similar process that we went through last year, and so with all of the federal funding that's available these days, we anticipate a much better opportunity to receive funding for this project. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions before we open it up to
Thank you
the
for your
public.
comments. So before we start the hearing, does council have any questions, comments? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, any questions or comments?
Yes, just a quick one to Director Worley. I know there's only preliminary look at, the additional land required and the cost analysis on that. Are there any regulatory or legal issues that might be associated with that, or are we unsure of that at this time?
We are not sure about it right now. We do know that, the area is similar to what we deal with under the existing reuse area farms. We have a high nitrogen situation in the groundwater in our area and in the area on the other side of Smith Canyon. Smith Canyon is also a stormwater runoff or a runoff area for water from the area north of the city. So we're not sure what the impact of that would be on any expanded land treatment system. We have not had the chance to explore those yet, but those are the things that we would look at, and we would have to go through the same process of evaluating those sites, very similar to the ones that we've included in our facility plan for expanding our land treatment system.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from council? Councilman Serrano?
Yeah, Mr. Worley, you mentioned that they being ecology, recently added total suspended solids to the permitting criteria. I understand that's new to the game and you probably don't have a strong basis, but do we have any idea what level of impact that's going to have? Is that the most frequent violation or risk thereof for these users, or do we have any sense there?
Yes, we kind of do. First off, TDS is total dissolved solids versus total suspended solids. So that makes it a little more difficult because it is dissolved. We use FDS right now, which is fixed dissolved solids, which is a subset of TDS. And so it will require us to start testing for the TDS parameter in all of our wastewater. The limit that ecology is going to provide for us is a 500 milligram per liter max month average. Currently, our groundwater TDS is higher than that. Our processed water TDS numbers vary quite a bit depending on where the water is coming from. It's higher than the 500, so we will have to look at reducing that TDS. We don't know yet how to do that, whether or not we can do that at any of the processors' plants by the chemicals they use to adjust for pH. That's one issue. We also are aware that the nitrogen removal system that is proposed, which is the rotating algal belt biofilm, is there has been a study done in 2020 that shows that it does also remove TDS as well. And so all of these levels we still have to figure out, and that's why ecology is giving us time to do that. There's a 5-year permit cycle, and so they are saying by the time the next permit cycle comes in, we have to have a plan in place on how to address it. So they've given us time to work that out.
So is that 5 years commenced, or that commenced upon? I don't. This permit, I don't recall it. Has it been issued, or?
We are currently operating with an expired permit, and so as soon as we submit our final facility plan with responses to Ecology's comments, which Ecology's already reviewed our responses and they agree with them, except for the TDS, and we will be submitting a revised permit application to them at the same time. So they will likely issue us a temporary permit to allow us to build and start operating the new facility. And then we usually take measurements to make sure it's working right and all that. And then they'll finalize that permit. And then there will be 5 years later, we will have to have a new permit just to make sure everything's working right. And it will be at that next permit cycle that the new TDS requirement will come into place.
I appreciate that. I know we have a lot potentially invested here, and it'd be unfortunate to see something like that throw us off. I guess the word of caution or warning is, insofar as we see that being problematic as quickly as possible, obviously your staff will address it from a technological standpoint, but if it seems like it's a break point, we'll definitely want to know that,
Right.
Well ahead of a significant investment.
Yep.
So please keep us posted. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, I will now open it to comments from the public, and I will start with Mr. Doug Pettinger. Are you connected?
Yes, I am connected.
Go
Can you
ahead.
hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. This is actually starting to get a bit beyond the Dairy Gold's participation level, because we are a new entity. This is a much bigger issue for the existing processors, although we will ultimately be one. And I understand that this is a very hard bridge to cross. The city's going from a very basic form of waste management to one that is much more complex. It's a big jump, but this change is really inevitable. It's ultimately unavoidable. You can push it off, as I think the city did back in 2019, but it'll inevitably return with a vengeance, and that would be with higher costs. And in the process, the city could lose some control over the situation, because if ecology starts enforcing more complex treatment, they usually get much more involved, and the city loses some flexibility. You'll be working on a schedule probably set by ecology, just as Steve just mentioned, and you may be deploying ecology's preferred solutions. And sometimes that's okay, and sometimes not. Some cities don't like to react until they're forced to do so, and that's actually common. But some cities prefer to lead rather than wait to be forced to do something more complex and more robust and protective of the environment. But other cities like to lead, and when it comes to reputations, that really carries the day with ecology, that the city's out leading on the issue. So this is really the city's choice. And it's kind of one of those situations: build it and they will come, or bump it down the road again and pass on it. And it's the city's future that we're talking about. Dairy Gold is in. We've got an agreement to have waste treatment provided by the city, and we're willing to be a partner on that project. So I really am going to avoid going any deeper and providing more technical comments. We think the city's on the right path. We realize it's a lot of money for processors to put on the table, but we think it's inevitable and necessary. And I guess that's really all I have to say tonight. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. And with that, I'll open it to anyone else in the chambers that wishes to make a comment on this article. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jonathan.
If you can please turn on the speaker. There you go. Thank you.
All right. My name is Jonathan Witt. I'm a senior environmental engineering manager for the J.R. Simplot Company. And I'm here tonight to comment on the technical inadequacies of the industrial wastewater treatment system. That would be the focus of the work associated with Resolution 4311. Simplot has successfully used conventional primary and secondary treatment with land application at agronomic rates to manage food processing wastewater, including at sites that have elevated groundwater nitrogen concentrations. We also have utilized complex but proven technologies when needed. Unfortunately, we have not had this same experience or level of success with municipal, industrial, or pretreatment systems, and we are concerned about the proposed facility's ability to maintain compliance with the city's wastewater reuse permit, putting our processing plant potentially at risk. The processors have consistently voiced concerns with the proposed Phase 3 costs and with the complexity of the proposed system. The purpose and need for the industrial wastewater treatment system is to reliably and cost-effectively treat industrial wastewaters while ensuring compliance with the city's wastewater permit. More proven treatment options have not been thoroughly vetted and could potentially provide a much cheaper and more reliable system. As proposed, this is a very complex project managed by Burnham. The most recent Burnham WTA has no cost containment provisions and does not have performance standards for all applicable constituents of concern. To address your question around TDS, there are typically two options for treating TDS. You either buy more land and spread that TDS out over more land, or you do very expensive reverse osmosis treatment. We may see minor reductions with the algae system, but that is unproven at this point. Both of those TDS options would come with a significant cost above what we're looking at now. So there potentially would be another large bill coming for the processors in 5 years. And that's a major concern for us also. The use of gross wind technology for nitrogen removal at this scale of treatment has not been proven. Although the city has stated that it is providing an assurance about the performance of the gross wind technology, the performance standard in the draft contract is likely not enforceable, and there's a financial risk to Simplot and other food processors if this technology fails to perform as required. A poll taken during a meeting with the city and all of the processors on February 16th showed that 6 out of the 7 processors were against moving forward with the proposed Phase 3 design due to these and other concerns. Until these concerns are resolved, it would be premature to approve the processor WTA. Based on these facts, I recommend that the council vote no on Resolution 4311 and that a thorough alternative evaluation is completed and that a separate WTA for the Phase 2 portion of the process be developed and approved as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else wishing to make comments on this matter? Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Ross-Kelly. I'm the Senior Environmental Programs Manager for the J.R. Simplot Company, and I'm here tonight to voice Simplot's concerns about the contractual obligations under this WTA and the WTA proposed between the city and Burnham. Now, the resolution before you today is specific to the WTA between the processors and the city of Pasco. However, how it's written, all of the costs that will be incurred associated with the WTA between Burnham and the city will get passed through to the processors. So I'll be referring to both WTAs here so you can get a perspective of our concerns. The Pasco processor agreement is exceedingly unfavorable to Simplot and the other processors. Essentially, we would bear all responsibility for costs once the system is operational, and those are uncapped liabilities. The city provides 0 warranties to Simplot on the work, and Burnham provides 0 warranty to the city on their work. The performance agreement being proposed for Burnham does not contain a nitrogen concentration for the treated water, and a lack of a performance standard is unacceptable. Additionally, the agreement with Gross Wen does not contain performance standards. The draft agreement does not appear to have any financial requirements of Burnham, and if the treatment system that Burnham builds and owns fails to perform as needed, it is not clear what remedies the city has. In addition to costs associated with the construction, operation, and maintenance of the system, the draft agreement between the city of Pasco and Burnham guarantees Burnham at least $350,000 per month in RNG revenue. If that amount is not achieved through the sale of RNG, which may be due to variable generation due to processing seasonality, pricing, or demand, then the city, and therefore the processors, are responsible for making up the difference. Keep in mind the need for this wastewater treatment plant is to treat processed wastewater to acceptable standards under ecology, not to generate biogas. That should be a side benefit. Additionally, Simplot's only recourse for early termination is if the city is unable to accept influent wastewater to the system for a 6-month period of time. If Simplot does elect to terminate its contract with the city early, it must pay off Burnham's outstanding debts to the lenders, even if the system completely failed. Simplot's recourse in the event of serious failures is nearly non-existent, and Burnham must only provide updated plans to remedy any major failures. The bottom line is that the agreement proposed results in a significant financial obligation by the processors without mechanisms for accountability on performance or cost controls from Burnham. Based on these facts, I recommend the council vote no on Resolution 4311 and request that the city update the water treatment agreements with the processor's comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Third and final call for comments on this matter.
Good evening. My name is Shem Esh. I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Construction for Grimway Farms. We're one of the processors that are included in the city's proposed PWRF plan. My statement outlines my letter submitted to the city last week, and I acknowledge that Mr. Worley provided additional information yesterday, Sunday, but we have not had time to review it properly. On behalf of Grimway Farms, I want to thank you for the city's and especially Steve Worley's effort in directing the design, financing, and communication towards a comprehensive solution that meets the needs of the processors and the requirements of the Department of Ecology. Thank you. We know this has been a consuming effort for all those involved. With the advent of recent cost projections provided by the city in late November 2022, Grimway and other processors have expressed concern and raised objections over the high cost of these projects. In fact, the projected aggregate costs have doubled since the city's original estimate provided in November 2018. This increase is alarming and constitutes an approximate 8-fold increase over Grimway's 2021 utility bill with the city. This increase is not only unreasonable from our perspective, but it's in violation with certain obligations made by the city to Grimway in 2013 that provided for the economic viability for Grimway to invest well over $40 million in its Pasco facility and its farming operations here. Therefore, we've been asking the city to consider alternatives, including the option to reduce treatment and in turn further explore the ability to increase acres for spreading water to mitigate nitrogen and eventually total dissolved solids. Although the city has contemplated these options, they have not exhausted these avenues thoroughly with the same vigor given to the current plan. We also are concerned about the complexity of such a system that would have to accept varying flow rates and loading rates throughout the year by all the different processors. The proposed PWRF plan, as proposed by Burnham SEV, focuses on maximizing the production of renewable natural gas, RNG, without a real effort to explore additional land application opportunities. We don't know if the current plan is the most feasible and reliable way to meet the Department of Ecology compliance, which is what is a primary concern of Grimway and the rest of the processors. The PWRF plan also involves the use of algae on a scale larger than any other current installation, which has caused for additional concerns surrounding its long-term reliability. Please remember that all the design, capital costs, and operational costs are passed through directly to the processors. Neither the city nor Burnham are providing any direct financial support. Therefore, if any of these systems ultimately fail or are determined to be ineffective, the processors are going to be on the line for additional costs to rectify the system. On top of all of this, the current drafts of the WTAs for Burnham and for the processors don't have a maximum cap on the total cost of the system yet. In fact, the WTAs allow for higher construction costs to be passed along to the processors without limit. So as you may surmise, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for the processors to commit to such an agreement until the guaranteed maximum price is determined for the entire project. In light of the above, Grimway cannot support the current PWRF plan, the Burnham Wastewater Treatment Agreement, or its own WTA until further attention is given to the alternative options. We trust the City Council will take our concerns into consideration and vote no on the proposal in front of you. In the meantime, Grimway is committed to exploring reasonable alternatives which adequately address outstanding concerns about cost and reliability, at which point Grimway can seriously consider moving on from the current arrangement which was negotiated with us and the city in 2013. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you for your comments. And with that being the third and final call for comments, we will now close this hearing. And we now have a need for a motion. Councilman Milton, can I get a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve resolution number 4311, authorizing the interim city manager to enter into the process water reuse facility PWRF industrial wastewater pretreatment agreement with the processors for the PWRF pretreatment improvements phase 3 project.
There's a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Campos. All those in favor say aye.
Madam Mayor,
Yes. Mayor
can we have
Pro Tem Maloney.
discussion before we take a vote?
Yes.
I appreciate that. Director Worley, there was a lot brought up by the two organizations in terms of, some very strong concerns about this resolution in front of us and the agreement in general. In addition to, I think I heard 6 out of 7 processors opposed to this. That's not information that I think I've heard before. Can you either help us address some of those, or if appropriate, could we adjourn to executive session for any items that may need to be discussed in such a venue?
Yes, I can address it. The concerns that were expressed appear to be the same ones that were in the letters that were received last week, and many of the concerns that I discussed with Mr. Witt and Mr. Esch on Wednesday and Thursday last week. I thought there was a lot of additional information added or clarified during those meetings, but it appears that they still have concerns, even though some of what they have described in the letter and what we discussed are, we wouldn't agree to interpreting the agreements the way they are. Some of the stuff that you heard tonight is not correct. I don't know of an easier way to say it. There are things in the agreements that are covering a lot of what some of the concerns are. So, for example, there are performance guarantees proposed in the project, both on the GWT algae system, and there are also guarantees proposed by Burnham in their agreement. Are the agreements in final form? No. There are some things that I learned during our discussions last week with two of the processors that we agreed to address in future drafts of the agreement before they are finalized. One of them, what that was brought up tonight, was the nitrogen concentration coming out of the algae treatment system. We agree, we can look at that, that's not a problem. The performance guarantee is one that just keeps coming up. There is a performance guarantee provided, and so I don't know how to get around that. There are cost controls on Burnham in the agreement. The $350,000 that was mentioned as far as the revenue from the RNG was a misinterpretation of that number within the agreement, and it's a difficult one to understand because of the way that the agreement was written, but what that number represents is the minimum amount of RNG revenue that Burnham is guaranteeing to come back to the processors. They're not taking it anywhere, they guarantee it. If their revenues are less than that, they still guarantee giving $350,000. Now, does that particular area of Burnham's agreement need to be addressed? I think we can change the language on that. And not only that, the amount of renewable natural gas revenues that are proposed are far greater than what was originally planned. We anticipated about a $12 per MMBTU, and they are now getting about $20, or maybe it was 15 to 20. So the revenues that they're getting, and they have a signed 20-year contract with a fixed price for that RNG revenue, and so it's locked in, and so it's guaranteed, and it's much more than $350,000 a month, and so so there's a lot of these things that I think we can still discuss outside of tonight's meeting, but I thought we did address them, and apparently some of the processors don't feel that I addressed it very well. As far as the vote that was mentioned, we have monthly processor meetings, and during that meeting I asked how comfortable each of the processors were, and all but one of them said they were very uncomfortable with moving forward because of the cost. And so ever since that meeting, we have been trying every option, every opportunity we could think of to evaluate different ways of bringing the cost down. And each alternative that we evaluated appeared to be more expensive than the one that we are currently proposing. And so we've tried every way to Sunday to evaluate this, and unfortunately nothing's coming up just yet.
Thank you for that. We have comments. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, any further questions?
Yeah, this continues to be a real struggle for me because, of course, the magnitude of this is massive, and you know, this is a sort of facility that you want in partnership with the users, as opposed to something that, you know, we're doing to them. I've looked very hard at this agreement and the technical basis behind this, the option analysis. I've had multiple conversations with Director Worley to understand better what exactly the technical and legal basis is for a number of these items. And I've certainly heard the processor's concerns. And it's hard for me to dispute them because we are moving very quickly, and simply put, something of this magnitude is something that takes time to get comfortable with. If I understand correctly, what's in front of us tonight is an agreement, but also allows for substantive changes to continue to be made after we vote tonight, if we were to pass this resolution, and allow for staff to continue to work through some of the concerns and questions in front of us. Director Worley, is that an accurate representation of what's in front of us tonight?
Yes, it is.
How will we as council be updated on those substantive changes as we move through the process, or continue to negotiate and move through the process?
we can continue to provide updates to council as often as council would like.
What is the value of us providing this, passing this with substantive changes still need to be negotiated as opposed to waiting until those changes are negotiated before council passes it?
That I don't know.
I can help you with it.
Okay, thanks.
So basically, one of the things that, what this resolution, this is a little different, or a lot different than what we normally do. If you'll notice, the resolution is to allow the interim city manager to go forth, make additional substantive changes. That doesn't say minor, but they would be clearly substantive changes. And the resolution tonight is to authorize the interim city manager to go forth, finish those negotiations, and then be able to execute these documents. The reason for that, and that's why it's in the substantial form that it's in now, and before you, and asking for that authorization, is time. Because as these move forward with the time that we're on, based on the schedule that we're trying to meet, it takes time to be able to come back to council, if we were going to come back to council for each particular agreement with each processor. So, and so we don't know what that would look like in terms of, are we going to have all 7 finalized at the same time? So really what this is a delegation resolution to authorize the interim city manager to be able to go forth and finish those negotiations and execute those documents on your behalf. Clearly, that's something that you have to decide whether you're comfortable with proceeding with. But that was the goal, is the schedule. It's time.
Thank you for further explanation. And we had some comments from some of the council members. Do you still wish to make your comments? Councilman Brown.
I did yield to Mr. Ferguson. Thank you for that. But time is of the essence. I don't know how deep we can go. I'm just transparent. So business is business. So we're really in a crunch time with moving forward. And let's just put Burnham at the top of the list. Is that something we talk about tonight, or we move forward as you come? Okay, I just wanted to make sure, clear that.
Sure. Yeah, no, so this is the chicken and egg kind of scenario, and we've been doing a whole lot of work on the chicken, and now we're working on the egg. So with regard to the processor agreements. So the goal is to really get these in front of you, take a look at these, and there's still some issues that need to be worked through with Burnham with regard to the general wastewater treatment agreement with them. So the goal was to get you something that we might be able to potentially approve, so that we could finish these negotiations and try to get folks comfortable with that. But really, it was just a matter of seeing if we could get this one, because there is still some time left for things that need to be done with regard to the Burnham agreement, that we'd hope that we could get this one in front of you and get a sense of where you're at with this.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilman Campos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank Director Worley and thank the processors for coming out. Your concerns are valid and heard, but I do want to thank Director Worley, especially your consistent and constant updates on the avenues that you've been looking at, and the justifications you've provided to council have kind of helped mitigate any concerns I feel like that at least I have as a council member. Understanding that, again, time is of the essence. We've kind of talked about that. The longer we beleaguer this, it seems as if labor rates are going up by the hour, literally. Procurement rates for material are going up. And the longer we try to look for a cost-effective solution, it's costing money in the long run. So moving on this, I think I understand very clearly why this is such a tight turnaround, and having the flexibility to continue negotiations on the back end, again, satisfy my concerns. So that's all I've got to say.
Councilman Serrano.
Yeah, so I think my primary concern in response to you, Mr. Ferguson, and this is just me being nitpicky, is, the authorization is to enter into the agreements. Now, when you read the proposed ordinance or the proposed resolution, it does say in substantially the same form. So I do believe that's a savings clause. That said, there is a bit of a pause of concern where we have this direction essentially to accept it, then it's substantially the same form, and we're hearing that some of the processors may not want to see substantially the same form. I mean, formulaically, it might be the same, whatever 14 clauses, But the substance isn't, you know, in the bullet points, right? So I think that's where I have a bit of concern hearing these concerns from our processors, and I do appreciate, Mr. Worley, the amount of effort you and your staff have put into this, and I do think it's a very important project because it's got tremendous future impacts, tremendous potential benefits, but it also may come at a tremendous cost that may run out people who have been here for well over a decade, maybe even several decades, who quite frankly are the basis for having really anything out that side of town. So I think, you know, we just need to be very careful on how we tread here. We're very blessed to have Dairy Gold and other folks come in and court us, or the Port of Pasco, but at the same time, we've had folks who've sustained us for quite some time, and we don't want to, I guess the best way to say is cut our nose off to spite our face. So I appreciate everybody's effort collectively, and again, my concern being, not that I don't trust you, Adam, no offense, just, you know, we just want to make sure that what we're doing is right for the whole of the entity, if you will, being the PWRF users.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Milne.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of on the fence on this meeting, and I can see their point. I can obviously see the city's point. So what if we pass this and then like 2 months later they came back and they're still unhappy? I mean, have we just told them that they have to pay for everything? If they're, I mean, what's your thought on all that? Or are you guaranteeing us that you're going to negotiate and they are going to be all happy? I mean, what?
I believe the intent is that it's important for council and the city to try to get the processors into an agreement related to this project prior to us entering into an agreement with Burnham. So the intent is to, if it's council's desire to move forward, we would move forward with trying to finalize agreements with each of the processors, look at any of the other options that we can within the time frame that's available to us, and then see how many of them are willing to do it. We are postponing the Burnham wastewater treatment agreement until closer to the end of March to see whether we can get to a point of getting the processors on board in agreement moving forward. And if not, that will be the time where council gets to decide whether or not to enter into the agreement with Burnham. And so that was the intent for trying to, you know, allow the ability to continue negotiating with each of the processors. Now, if we do have a commitment to Dairy Gold, and we want to honor that commitment, we will honor that commitment. And so they have a deadline next year in which we need to be able to accept their wastewater. So if it is council's desire and the processor's desire not to move forward with the processor agreements or the Burnham agreements, then what I've shared with the processors is that we will stop all work on the project related to any increases in flows or treatment methods for them, and we would focus all of our efforts on getting all the facilities necessary for treating Dairy Gold's wastewater. And then we'll pick up wherever we left off later and try to move it forward at that time.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. That did help.
Councilwoman Roach.
So some of the comments that I heard from the processors, Director Worley, had to do with doubtfulness in the process itself. So there was a suggestion that there's no guarantee that it will work. And so being you are my in-house expert on this matter, so I'm looking to you to answer that for me. When I hear that comment, that public comment, I'd like to know the assurance from you as the in-house expert, is the process being put forward one that is reliable?
The process that has been put forward is, well, first off, there are two treatment methods being proposed. One is the wastewater treatment process, which is the low-rate anaerobic digester, which is a proven technology. I think even some of our processors would say that they have these on their own systems elsewhere within the country. The other issue or process is the nitrogen removal system. And this particular system has been reviewed by multiple engineering companies because the funding agencies for this project are not going to fund a project that does not work. So there have been 2 independent engineering companies review and work with the algae biofilm company to review the process and the system, and both have come back and said it is a viable solution. And so in my opinion, and in their opinion, and in the opinion of others, we believe that it will work, and there is a guarantee associated with that nitrogen removal system. The guarantee says that if they can't meet the nitrogen removal process, then they, at their cost, will construct another system called a membrane system to remove whatever nitrogen is not removed by their original system at no cost to the processors. So we feel very confident, and as I mentioned in our meeting last week, if you think about it, the systems are made up of modules. Each module has 10 belts on it. There are 13 of these modules. All of the modules are going to react the same way. They're all going to treat the wastewater the same way in each module. So we don't believe that there's any reason to think that by adding more modules, any one module is going to work any differently than the one before it. So we are confident that it'll work, and we have the performance guarantee to back it up.
I appreciate that answer. And the other, I guess, concern that I heard from processors were that there's no cap. And so from reading the report, I'm surmising that the RNG revenue is the trade-off essentially of not having a cap. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
I think the referral to a cap is that there is no limit to the amount of cost to the processors. And the agreement with Burnham has a clause in it that basically limits their increase in the amount of monthly fee by, I think it's $170,000 a month. So there is a limit that is in the agreement that puts a cap on it. And so that's already negotiated. There are clauses in the Burnham agreement that allow final costs to be determined as we go through this process, and then the monthly fee would increase or decrease accordingly. But there is a limit on how much that fee can increase.
Okay, so that answers my final question that I had, because there was a statement made that there was not a negotiated cap with Burnham, so
I think that's where some of the confusion might lie, because I think it's getting confused with the overall cost versus the monthly fee.
Okay.
And we can certainly clarify that as we continue our negotiations. And there are things that the processors have brought up that are in the Burnham agreement that we agree could be clarified quite a bit. We know more now than we did previously.
Thank you, and I will just say to my fellow council members that I am in the affirmative in approving this to go forward so that interim city manager can negotiate these and they can have progress to have conversation and negotiation so that this does not stall.
Thank you. Councilman Brown, do you have comments?
Just a quick question, Mr. Ferguson. Do we have current agreements with each processor on file?
I'm not going to answer that in open session.
Okay.
We can talk about that in executive session.
Sounds good.
It's a little more of a complex
No,
issue.
that's good. That's good. I just wanted to kind of write it out.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
happy to talk to you about that in executive session.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I do have a question for you, Mr. Ferguson. There's a motion and it's been seconded. Is there a recommendation that we amend this to where if there's a concern over the verbiage of the motion? So this motion as it sits is to allow interim city manager into an agreement on improvements of phase 3 project.
So the motion, I think, is taken from the resolution. I think that's how that got into the agenda. But the actual resolution states that the interim city manager, basically the council would be resolving that the interim city manager is hereby authorized to execute the attached PWRF industrial pretreatment agreement in substantially the same form with each of the processors for the PWRF pretreatment improvements phase 3, a copy of which is attached here to and incorporated herein by reference to Exhibit A, and to make substantive changes as necessary to execute the agreement. So this is unique in that it doesn't direct the city manager to enter into the agreement. The resolution doesn't. So if we want to tweak the language, I'm not concerned about the motion. But if council is more comfortable, instead of the motion saying moving to approve resolution 4311, authorizing interim city manager to execute, if that makes folks feel better, because it's more related to what's in the actual resolution. I don't think it makes a substantive difference, but other folks may know more about it. And
Any
if council member
on changing the wording?
Yeah, I suspect you're asking me. No, I mean, having read that, I think that clarifies the purpose. Just my concern then becomes we're putting a lot on our interim city manager.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I don't think you can, again, I want to be very clear here. You're in a trial period and this is a big issue and we're flat saying, here's kind of the makeup, fix it. That's a lot to put on your shoulders. Not that I don't think you can do it. I think it's somewhat, to be honest, a little bit unfair for you to anticipate that. But I'm confident that you can handle it. That said, I'm still concerned with this as it's written and as presented tonight. Some of the concerns. So just be clear, a vote in the negative won't impact my performance review, Mr. Lincoln.
All right, with that, any further questions or comments on the verbiage?
This is Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Yes, go ahead.
Just briefly, I just want to say that I echo Councilmember Serrano's concerns, and I'm not sure that I'm ready to delegate the full negotiation of this at this point in time, with such weighty conversations still to be had. I'm still in favor of moving forward in this in some form or fashion, but I'm not ready to delegate that authority from council at this time. So I'll be a no vote on the resolution or the motion as presented. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Again, I just want to say thank you for your comments, to the processors for your comments. I do hope that we can continue the conversation on how to improve this agreement, to work with you all, to continue working with you all. So with that, there's a motion and it's been seconded. And thanks. We'll do a roll call vote on this.
All right. Councilmember Roach,
I'm gonna say that we should amend this motion.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion on?
No, I don't, but I'm looking for one from my fellow council members so that we can make some progress forward without totally stopping at this point. And so I'm looking for that verbiage, whether it's enter into, not necessarily execute, because that's what I'm hearing from some of our fellow council members.
So
Mr. Ferguson.
currently we have a motion. It's been seconded. The vote was called. The roll call vote was called. So this vote.
Needs to happen.
This vote needs to happen, and then if there's something else that folks want to come back and make an amended motion, that would probably be the cleanest way to do it. There may be other ways to do it, but that's what I would recommend.
So, Councilmember Roach,
No.
Councilmember Serrano,
No.
Councilmember Campos,
No.
Councilmember Brown,
No.
Councilmember Milne,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
No.
and Mayor Barajas.
No.
It's a unanimous opposition.
Thank you. And with that, can we get a suggested amendment?
Can you explain what I hear you say is the amendment you're looking for is rather than enter into the agreement but continue negotiations? I mean, is that?
I think that's what it
I'll,
would make
I'll
sense.
simply say from my perspective, that doesn't respond to my concerns. I'm not gonna speak for 6 other people, but I don't know what exactly you're looking for or whatever anyone else is looking for.
So let me.
So yeah, I just wanted to
Sure.
respond or.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me have a take on this. So maybe a motion that says something about I move to approve further negotiations? No.
So, no, so that's where we're at. And so the only goal was if council was comfortable moving forward with authorizing the interim city manager to conclude those negotiations and execute and enter these agreements. And if that's really the only question, because that was negotiations are gonna continue one way or the other, whether this is approved tonight or whether it doesn't get approved. Either way, negotiations are still gonna continue. So staff doesn't need extra direction for that or authorization for that. We really just we're looking for whether council was comfortable authorizing staff to go forward now administratively entering into these agreements, because council retains the right to contract until it's been delegated. So that's why we're here. But if that's not what council's comfortable doing, then yeah, then the motion fails, and it's probably
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, I don't think so.
As it sits. Okay. All right. Well, it's been moved and denied. All
Motion
right.
fails.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, this special meeting is concluded. We'll move on to our regular workshop meeting. With all housekeeping out of the way, we'll move on to item 4 on our, we'll take a 5-minute break. All right, thank you everyone for that brief little break. And so we're back with our regular workshop meeting. And with all housekeeping items out of the way, we'll move on to item 4 on the workshop agenda, verbal reports from council members. Do we have any reports from any of the council members? Councilmember Serrano.
Just real quick, attended the Hanford Area Economic Investment Fund, very fund investment committee, advisory committee fund meeting this afternoon. And we do, as I've mentioned many times, there's money to be loaned out there. So for people who want to diversify businesses from Hanford, we're an option. We actually heard from one of the folks we loaned to, which was Fuse down in Richland. And it sounds like they're looking at getting some of their monies rolling too. So, I mean, there are opportunities for businesses to come in outside of obviously TRIDAC, and the various chambers of commerce are very supportive too. So did that, and then also had the opportunity to see Councilman Brown a few minutes ago at the track. I'm going to out him, dressed sharper than I was in my hoodie, at the track to meet the 3 finalists for the county commissioner. Our very own Mike Gonzalez. There were 2 other gentlemen, one from Texas, I think his name was Rick, I can't remember his last name, and I didn't quite catch the gentleman from the other side of the state. He introduced himself briefly, and so yeah, county's very blessed to have different opportunities ahead of them for the county administrator, and I'm excited to see what lies ahead. So thank you.
Councilwoman Roach.
Thank you, Mayor, and just wanted to share a week before last, attended a ribbon cutting for Prime Dental West Pasco. So this is their second location. Their first was in West Richland, really great to have them join our community. And the other was, I believe we were all there in attendance at the new fire station groundbreaking. And so it was really nice to meet the new recruits and get to do that. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Councilman Campos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, Councilman Serrano does bring up a good point. He does talk about the Hanford Advisory loans quite a bit. I'm curious, what are some of the requirements for people who are applying for the loan? What should they prepare to bring when they apply?
Yeah, so there's a whole application process. A lot of it has to do with how you want to intend to collateralize the loan, if at all. There will be some credit history. We've added that. The primary concerns of our loans are, again, diversifying business. So if you want to open a bakery, let's say, and you have 12 people that you'll employ full time, and then your projection is in 15 years you're going to have 6 bakeries, and that's 100 people. Again, the fundamental goal is to utilize Hanford waste fees to bring it to businesses and ventures outside of just servicing the Hanford site. So any economic thing, I mean, if you want to build a gas station, or if you want to take, Burnham, obviously a larger project, but taking waste from Hanford and making it some type of renewable, like, there's a lot out there. But again, the key element is bringing additional employment opportunities outside of just kind of Hanford-centric work.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
So, quick follow-up question on that. Where would one go to apply?
Yeah, it's Hanford Area, HAEIFAC, Hanford Area Economic Investment Fund, and I think the website is just HAEF.org, HAEIF.org is what it should be.
Okay.
I could be wrong there. I haven't checked the website in a long time, or maybe .com. I can get that to everyone.
Sounds good. Thank you for that update. Not wanting to put you on the spot, but thank you. Councilman Milne.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week I did attend the COPA meeting, and I thought it was kind of cool is that they're having a delegation going over in October to the beginning of November. And what's cool about the event is they're bringing in the Colville Indian tribe to have different interactions so they could put on shows and show kind of a taste of what great things that we could have as far as entertainment and shows that the Native Americans could put on. So it was kind of cool. I thought it was pretty cool that Colville's partnering up with everybody and going to Kalima to show them what we're all about. So that's coming up later on this year.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Any further questions? Sorry. Any further comments? HanfordFund.com. Yep. All right. Thank you for that update. So with that, we'll go on to our next item on the agenda, item 5, items for discussion. And first on the agenda is a presentation by Columbia Basin College Master Plan, interim city manager.
So speaking of great partners, Dr. Woods is here tonight to talk about their updated master plan. I was fortunate enough to be invited to actually participate a little bit in the outreach portion of this plan, which covers, I think, up to 50 years, am I close, of development for the university. The colleges, I think, that, they've always been a really good partner with the city, and they've got some exciting programs that are planned, both in the short term and the long term. And as one of our partners, I think it's important that the city get briefed on some of those exciting things that are coming up for them.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming.
Woods.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to come and present on our master plan. You do have a condensed version of the plan in front of you, though there is a QR code on there that would take you directly to the website where the full plan is. But in the interest of saving paper, we didn't print the full plan. I did want to introduce, I have 2 colleagues with me here this evening. We have Eduardo Rodriguez, who's our Vice President for Administrative Services. It was his team that actually led the development of the campus master plan, as well as Dr. Jason Engel, who's our Dean of Organizational Learning, who also worked on another plan that I'll be sharing towards the end of the presentation a little bit about. And so they're here to help me answer any questions that I may not be able to respond to, but please feel free to stop me along the way if you have any questions. So just wanted to hit a few high points about the institution. As you all know, we are a comprehensive community college. We offer over 100 programs. As a comprehensive community college, those are a wide array of programs, everything from learning English all the way up to one of our currently our 8 baccalaureate programs. We have a 9th one starting in the fall in community health. I always talk about, we offer everything from trades to transfers, so the full spectrum of what our community might need. We also offer athletics. We actually are hosting the NWAC Regional Championships. We have 2 upcoming weekends in this month. Well, we'll be bringing in lots of teams from across the region, not just our own state, but different states, surrounding states, all of their families and friends. So we'll be very busy on our campus and in our community. We also have performing arts that we offer not only to our campus, but to our community as well. And then, of course, we offer housing for our students, which I'll share a little bit more about later. We are one of 6 Hispanic serving institutions in the state. This is actually a core component of our new strategic plan, making sure that we are truly living out our identity as an HSI. Diving into the plan a little bit, as Adam mentioned, as a community college, obviously our mission, our vision, we're here to serve the needs of the community in which we're located. And so we always start out that kind of work with making sure that we're meeting with our community and trying to hear from them what are their needs to make sure that those can be incorporated to any plans that we do. So you can see some of the organizations that are listed here, including the city that we had conversations with, and the specific feedback and the information that we received. It actually is in the printed document that you have in front of you. I'll just hit on a few of the highlights of our priorities for state-funded projects that are included in the plan. So the first one is a new performing arts center. And we actually were hopeful that we would be getting funding from the state for this this biennium. I'll be surprised if we get it this year, but perhaps in the supplemental session, though at the latest the next biennium, because we are next on the list for the prioritized list for our system, all 34 community colleges across the state. The second priority for us is also on that approved list. It would be a new building focused on applied science and agriculture, so a new center. And then that we would expect about 4 bienniums out. That's just a projection based on whether the state continues to give our system the same amount of capital funding that we've received, that we would project to receive that in 29 to 31. And then another one, number 3, would be a new library. That would probably be closer to about 20 years out, which is why we are currently doing a fairly significant renovation of our current library that will hopefully be wrapping up, and we'll be reopening that in April. So just touching on some of the high points of what our new 10-year plan, what the new 10-year map would look like. And again, you have a lot of the details in front of you. But number 1, the building listed there, right in the center of campus is where the new Performing Arts Center would go, just a little bit north of where the current building is located. And then we'd be replacing the location where the current building is with some additional recreation fields for our students. We also have the second, it's listed as number 2 there, towards the northeast side of the campus. Would be a new, in essence, a classroom building to be able to focus on the growth that we are experiencing with enrollment and programs on our campus. And so that would be a teaching center. And that would not be a state-funded project. That would be something that would be coming out of other funds that the college has been saving in our reserves for, to be able to bring that to our campus. The number 3 there, up in the top right-hand corner, is where we are hoping the second housing unit and then also our third housing unit would be. It would be located right next to where Sanha Hall currently is, the first housing unit that we have for our students. And we truly want them to all be together because we are intending to build a community for our residential students. The research is clear that when you have students who feel a sense of belonging on campus and have a community that they feel a part of, that is what is going to help them be retained and be successful and complete. So that is why we have requested to the city to be able to purchase the property next to the existing housing unit so that we can build the second and the third one right next to it.
Can you stop there just for a moment?
Absolutely.
What percentage of your population is housed on camp, or I don't know exactly how you term that. I heard you say it, but I glossed past me.
I actually have some more detail on the housing in 2 more slides. If you
Yep.
wouldn't
no,
mind
we-
holding
we
that,
can-
I'll dig into that. And then if I don't answer those questions, please feel free to stop me again.
Perfect, thanks.
Absolutely. So in 20 years, what we would expect to see on our campus, that next state-funded building, number 1 there, that Center for Applied Science and Agriculture, would be towards the north end of our campus. We would also expect the new library that's number 3 listed there, over on the east side of the campus. And that is also then when we would expect, again, in the top right-hand corner, number 4, the 3rd housing unit would be. You have maps in your handouts for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. I'm not going to go into the detail of each of those, but cut to the chase and show you what the end goal would be for our campus after the 50 years. So you can see the overall vision is really, right now we have kind of a mixture across campus of buildings, parking lots, green space, but it's really to have a more cohesive, in essence, quad look of the campus. So as we are building new buildings and demolishing existing ones, moving those out to more of that quad look so that we would have greenery and gathering space in the middle, and then all of the parking would be moved to the outer perimeters of the campus. So the next slide is where I will start to dig in a little bit more deeper into our housing. So we have the majority of our students are coming from within the state, though we do have students from actually across the country. Right now we have 10 different states that are represented in our housing. There's 126 beds, and when we started the school year, those were full, with a waiting list that would have that was at the point where we felt like we needed to begin the work on building a second building. To live in housing, you have to be a full-time student, a full-time college student at CBC. The only time we've made exceptions for that is during the summers. We will agree to host interns that are here. We've had interns from PNNL and from the Department of Energy that are just here for a few months during the summer, but that's only if we have space allowed, and then that would just be for that specific summertime. As opposed to other housing that's available across our community, our housing is by no means a business, even though obviously there's a financial and operational components to it, but it's a service that we provide to our students. So we are by no means, trying to make money on this. We are covering our costs so that our students can afford to live in this housing. These are fully serviced apartments available for our students. You can see the cost there. And again, that is incredibly important to us to make sure that our rents remain affordable for our students. We know that this is affordable housing, that many of our students would have no other options but having this available to them. During the pandemic, a lot of colleges and universities across the country, even in our state, they were shutting down. They were even closing their housing and sending their students home. We did not do that because there is, for many of our students, no other home to send our students to. This is where they live. This is their only home. So for our students having affordable housing, we've heard from some students that are currently living there, as well as those that were on a waiting list, that they would be homeless, but for the fact that we had this available for them. Does that answer your questions about?
That's helpful for today. I think, do you have the number of the waiting list?
This summer, it was easily that we would be able to fill it another half building at the time. So by the time that we know we're able to start doing design and construction, that will continue to build and be at the point where we'd be able to fill a second building.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep. So one of the things I always talk about that I so appreciate in the Tri-Cities is the focus on a collective impact theory of how our communities work together, making sure that we are focused on what's best for each other so that we know we can accomplish more when we work together rather than if we work in silos. And so we absolutely want to emphasize that we strongly believe that when both the city and the college are growing and thriving together, that's going to make both of our entities better. We have prided ourselves on being a good partner with the city. Just a few examples of how we have done that. With the Argent Road widening project that has been happening, we've contributed funds to that work of over $1 million. In addition to that funding, we also provided 2 right-of-ways to property to be able to make that possible without any cost to the city. We also provided outright some property that was a 15-foot strip along the north end of our campus and deeded that over to the city to allow that project to continue, again, at no cost to the city. Because again, we want to be able to help support the goals and the priorities of the city, because we feel like, again, when the city is growing and thriving, so is the college. We were also a partner in the work that was done to bring the Argent Road on-ramp to 182, as well as, and we requested the crosswalk on 20th Avenue and helped to pay for that, which has been a wonderful benefit for our students. So we're very, very grateful that that is now available for our students. Wanted to also share the study that we have recently completed. Dr. Engel and his team partnered with Lightcast, an outside entity, to look at the economic impact of the college in the community. In essence, quantifying the value that CBC brings to the Tri-Cities. So what their findings were is that the total impact of having the college in the Tri-Cities brings nearly $400 million each year to the Tri-Cities. And that's in annual income for Benton and Franklin counties. That's equal to 2.4% of the total gross regional product. That $400 million comes from, in part, our operation spending. So the payroll and how those employees are then, the ripple effect that comes from how they're using that money in the community. Any construction spending that happens, and this is from our new student recreation center this past year. Another big part of that is our students. So about 9% of our overall students come from outside of the region. So the money that they are spending now in the Tri-Cities and the ripple effects that come from that are because they are moving here to attend the college, as well as the other students that perhaps were already from our region, but were able to stay in our community because of the fact that CBC was here and offered an education that they were able to take a part of. So between our relocated and retained students, that's bringing in more than $8 million. And then the vast majority of that $400 million is from our alumni, the thousands and thousands of graduates that we have had come through the college since the college began in 1955. And the higher alumni earnings that they have, the education and the wages that has been able to bring them and that they have been able to, in turn, give back to the community. So when we look at an investment analysis, when it looks at students and their return on investment for every dollar that they spend at the college, and that's not only in spending but also in a dollar of foregone wages, for while they're spending their time at school rather than working, they will get $6.70 in return for a 20% rate of return. For taxpayers, for every dollar that is invested in public money into the institution, the return is in full with a dollar and an additional 40 cents with a 1.3% rate of return. And this is for added tax revenue that comes into the city, as well as increased business input and output from what our students, our alumni, our employees, but then different events that we have on campus, like the NWAC Regional Championships over the next few weekends and the amount of money that is going to bring into the city. But then also reduced amount of government-funded services. Part of our vision talks about providing economic and social mobility for our students, and providing a pathway for many of our students out of poverty that they no longer need to avail themselves of government-funded services. So again, every dollar that's invested of public money into the college is absolutely coming back to the public, and then some. This is a study that we do every 5 to 6 years, and it always comes back so positive with such a benefit, showing the benefit that the college provides to a community. It's just a privilege for us to be able to share this with those. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions, but that was the bulk of my presentation for this evening.
I apologize. I gave you the space. Any questions or comments for Dr. Woods? Councilman Campos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Woods, for your presentation. I just want to highlight some of the things that you talked about as far as trades transfers and your alumni impacts. You know, I'm a proud CBC Hawk. I was a teen father. My daughter was born the day before I turned 18. I struggled at a point in my life where I potentially could have lived in my own car at a time when I could have used housing, and it's nice to see that the opportunities afforded to kids that are coming up. And I'm glad to say that I contribute to the alumni impacts now. I'm a homeowner, and I'm looking at buying multiple properties, so I feel like I'm doing okay, right? Trying to convince the youth, especially now my daughter, explaining to where I was at, where she's at currently, the benefit of CBC. She was a late bloomer to taking advantage of the Running Start program. She's doing it now her senior year, and I think that her eyes have finally kind of opened up. Comment she made to me, our experiences are drastically different. When I was there from all the way from 2007 to 2016, long stretch, parking always seemed to be an issue. She says it's not an issue now. Looking at your first page of this slide, it seems to be that you're tapering off just a touch on enrollment. Is that simply because impacts you've seen from COVID, and vice versa? You know, parking. You're looking at long-term parking out in the future. Are you seeing a trend leading this direction because of the now accessibility we're seeing online? It used to be Angel, now it's Canvas. It's a lot easier to interface as a student. Are you seeing an increase of online enrollment that way?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. I love hearing those stories. That just makes me so proud of what we do every day, hearing that impact. Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. During COVID, I mean, across the country, enrollments were going down, and we were certainly no exception, and we lost about 20%, 15 to 20% of our enrollment. And so we have now just turned the corner and are coming back this fall, this winter. We're up 5 to 7% compared to where we were last year at this time. So we definitely still have a ways to go. But even as we're coming back, absolutely more students are staying online or taking hybrid. Hybrid is the big draw now. So we used to be, before the pandemic, 25-75. So 75% of our classes were face-to-face, 25% were online or hybrid version thereof. Right now we're at, I think it's 65-35%. And that's by, or is it 60-40? It might be 60-40. But that's by demand for students, because some of our hybrid sections or our online sections were filling up faster. And so obviously we're going to follow and respond to the demand that students are voting with their feet. So you bet. Even if they're taking a face-to-face, their focus is on hybrid, so they are not having to be on campus nearly as often. So parking is nearly not the issue that it was before. Even, the first few weeks of campus when we have so many students on campus, not necessarily just for classes, but trying to get some services taken care of, there's still spots to be had.
Understood. So follow up to that question, and thanks so much for sharing that. Do you see housing trend in the same direction as your hybrid or online enrollment, where just thinking out loud, I would think that you would see a trend in demand for housing go down as your increase in demand for online hybrid goes up? Are you seeing that they're pretty consistent with one another, or it's not even, the housing is so in demand that it would matter at all?
My response would be, I don't think it's going to impact it as much as we might think.
Okay.
Ironically, I have a student advisory board, and a lot of the students are living in housing, but ironically, many of them are still taking online classes or hybrid classes for a variety of reasons. A lot of times they're still working, they're participating in other activities, so they have that flexibility. And again, hybrid for them is that sweet spot, because it's still giving them the benefit of the face-to-face interaction with their faculty member and their classmates, but enough flexibility that they can still fit in all their other activities. So for students that are coming into the community, or those that want that, still more traditional college experience and want to be living on campus, they're still, going to need available housing for them.
Got it. Okay. I think that's it. Again, thank you so much. If anybody's out there listening, don't take micro and macroeconomics at the same time, especially online. Go to class for that one.
Dr. Engel actually teaches economics, so it's probably his hearty laugh.
It was very tough to understand both of the concepts at the same time, and then to completely do it online was challenging. So just word of the wise, macro and micro, don't do it.
Councilwoman Roach.
I'm gonna follow suit with Councilmember Campos and tell you a little bit about mine, and I appreciate you being here, Dr. Woods. My story with CBC, so I'm a graduate of CBC, and I actually did Running Start as well, and got to transfer effortlessly, if I could get that word out,
Nice.
to WSU, which was great because of that partnership that existed. So if you've ever had to transfer, you know how that haggling goes between credits being accepted. And so that was wonderful. And I lived a lot at the Math Tutor Center because I needed that assistance there when I was there. But anyhow, it afforded me the opportunity to graduate with my bachelor's eventually and pay my student loans in less than a year because I did that pathway of Running Start Community College and then transfer, and brought me full circle back with a master's in teaching to CBC campus at New Horizons in its original location in the northwest corner, which it's not here on the map any longer. So while I visited this new building that I used to take classes in, computer science classes, it's a great building, but I was curious about what the future plan, and I can't tell from the campus map what will go there, in the next 10 years or 10 to 50.
Yeah, so the majority of those facilities have now been taken down. There's one remaining facility that was more of a permanent structure that is still up there. And obviously that's been the space that we've been using for the COVID testing site for the last few years. And I believe the conversation has been more to have that become focused more for our, right now we have like maintenance buildings and facilities and grounds kind of sprinkled throughout campus, but to focus that over in that area where the old New Horizons facility was, so on the far west side of the campus.
Okay. So it's then CBC's intent to cluster housing together in where it's indicated on this map that you've in the
Correct.
consolidated report. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's all I have for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council members, for sharing your stories. Any further questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mayor Barajas. Dr. Woods, my apologies for not being there in person, but unfortunately duty calls for my day job too. So, but thank you. I really appreciated the economic impact study and the additional information on how this, CPC affects our community. Do you have any statistics on how many of your students come from Pasco or directly are either residents of or recent residents of Pasco?
We do. I mean, I can certainly get that. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can certainly pull that and send that to you.
I appreciate that. Don't mean to put you on the spot with
no, that's okay. We'll pull that data, and I can send that to Adam and ask him to share that with all of you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Again, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Mill.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. I do appreciate everything, and I really like the maps as they go on out. I went there 27 years ago, and I can say times I've been back, it's totally changed a lot of the buildings, and it's always amazing to me how it's keeps evolving. I just want to say this is a great partnership. We're glad that you're here. I know 27 years ago there was a time where I wasn't sure what to do, and going to CBC really helped, and then being able to go on to WSU, and it's just you're a vital entity for here in Pasco, and we're just thankful that you're here. So thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councilmember Brown, nothing? I will add my comments. as well as everyone else that's attended CBC. As a single mom with 2 kids, I did take advantage of going back and through the worker
retraining program.
So I did that. But my boys also graduated and transferred out to Pullman. They were, one of them was a tutor in your math center, so he did really good. But again, thank you. It's great collaboration, great partnership, and excited to see the growth and expansion.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
One thing. I just want to tell you thank you since, the mayor kind of threw me out there, but I don't have the great success stories yet. But your staff at CBC is awesome. As a current student, hoping to finish this bachelor's degree as soon as possible, like next summer, I will then have a story like the rest of them on that side of the room over there. But what I can tell you is that the institution is awesome and is very forgiving. And when I say that, because there's so many different circumstances that you all deal with on a daily basis, and I think you gracefully approach them, and your students feel confident enough with the baggage of life to go to class and have success stories like we're hearing on tonight. So as a current student, I applaud CBC and all of you all's efforts to get me my degree. Just want to tell you thank you for an awesome job.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
You're
Councilman Brown. Appreciate that.
Thank you again for the presentation, and
Just
Councilwoman Roach.
one more thing I'm taking advantage of right now. You're here, so there's a national shortage of speech language pathologists. So I'm going to put in a plug.
Okay.
That be a degree program or even SLPA that we pursue, because that is one thing that I know in my day job we're hurting as clinics across the state just need those therapists to serve kids with disabilities. And so it's a painful time.
Yeah.
We just don't have, cohorts only graduate about 25, WSU, Pullman and Spokane, and so it's just really difficult to employ.
I have no idea what the credentials are required to do that, but I can absolutely ask our instruction area to look at that and see if there is something that we could offer that would at least help lead to the pipeline for that program.
Right, and you guys have a great nursing program, so.
We have a phenomenal nursing program.
It's a great
Yes, we
pipeline
do.
for our local hospitals and clinics, so I appreciate that too.
Thank you.
Great.
Well,
Thanks
thank you
again.
all. Again, appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item B, Downtown Pasco Development Authority monthly report from Director White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Council probably recalls the 2023 funding agreement with the Downtown Pasco Development Authority calls for monthly reports from Executive Director Jerry Martinez. So here he is.
Yeah, good evening, Council. I'm just going to briefly touch on sort of 3 key areas: governance, our work with the BDS consultants, and then I'll wrap up with some highlights for operations and toss it back to y'all for some questions. Hopefully not another 2-hour question period. So on governance, just some updates of coming in and coming out. We've recently seen our longstanding board president, Gabriel, step down. And we appreciate and express lots of gratitude for the years of service he has given to the DPDA. So we're happy that he served so much time, and he has recently resigned from his time just for his own personal sake. But we want to thank you all in that same vein for appointing us 2 new board members in Edison and Suzanne. Both of which have been welcome guests or welcome additions to the board, both immediately taking leadership positions. Suzanne is our newly elected secretary, and Edison is our newly elected Cinco de Mayo committee chair. So both have hit the ground running and have already contributed well to the board. In the agenda packets, there is a sort of one-pager that Director Buckley put together. So for the first 5-6 months of 2023, Director Buckley and Griselda have come down to the DPDA office for what we began to call Finance Fridays. And so in your packets is a one-pager of the sort of range of topics and areas that we were focusing on, discussing, and touching for the DPDA. With the work of this sort of advising consultation from the city, I have presented a 2023 annual budget to our board, which was recently passed this past month. And we have actually turned our sights to internal controls for the organization. Suzanne actually at last board meeting drafted up a sort of a purchasing policy addition to our organization. So you have to forgive me. I think it's any purchases above 5,000. We have some additional processes and steps with the treasurer and the board president to take a part of before I can sign a check and deliver any purchases over $5,000. So we have recently moved those meetings from weekly to I think about once a month, but we look forward to moving into some of the next topics we're going to talk about is cash flow, accounting, and sort of, trying to see our year from a cash flow basis. When is money coming in? When is money coming out? So we're able to meet our financial obligations better month to month. So that's governance in a sort of nutshell. And speaking on our work with the BDS consultants, they also have, they released some notes from our first session, so I attached that to the agenda packet as well. So their first session, their first visit to Pasco, I believe they had some one-on-one sessions with a few of you here in the council chambers. They had one-on-ones with city staff, one-on-ones with myself, and some board members as well. And so what you see in the agenda packet is a sort of summary of our what they're beginning to call our leadership meeting. So it's me, myself, some board members, and some key city staff that are getting together and answering some of these questions and going through some of the facilitation with BDS consultants. They're back this week in Pasco, and this time the theme for their visit is going to be about business outreach. So I've scheduled a handful of one-on-ones with the BDS consultants and certain downtown businesses for them to just get some feedback from businesses that have been a part of downtown for decades, for years, businesses that have been a part of what was the PWRF back in its day. So I crafted together a couple one-on-ones with I think 3 or 4 businesses. And then we're working with Economic Development Manager Mike to take over the PBAC meetings monthly. So on Wednesday, we're hoping the BDS can have a big sort of group facilitation with some of the downtown businesses during the monthly Pasco Business Advisory Council. So there's that. And then just some overview of our operations. Just in the past week, with the new addition to funding for our organization, I've bought 2 new flat tops for the kitchen. Replacing one that honestly just wasn't heating up and working for our clients, and adding a new one to supplement the demand. And we were running into scheduling issues. Everybody wanted to use a flat top, and we just didn't have enough flat tops for our clients to use. So I was actually able to purchase a few this past week, which is exciting. Our farmers market is kicking up, and we have gone from, I think 2 months ago, I told you we were 1 of 5 in the pilot program. We are now 1 of 1 in the new SNAP market program. So we are working directly with the Washington Department of Health on what this new SNAP program can look like for the rest of our farmers markets. And we'll be one of the key sort of partners equipping farmers with that sort of SNAP EBT direct to consumer processes. And then, planning for Cinco de Mayo. How can I forget? That's on my mind every single day. So we have a weekly meeting tomorrow. That's happening tomorrow. Edison is leading those meetings with some key city staff involved as well, and then some board members. And then on Wednesdays, we get into a smaller group and just talk logistics, what needs to get done. Currently, I'm working on the permitting. We're working on sort of some of the feedback for the parade route for some of the event and just kind of implementing safety where we can. So that's my try to be brief report.
Thank you for that. Any questions from any of the council members? Councilmember Brown and then Councilman Serrano.
No questions, just comments. I think you did an excellent job. What you guys are doing downtown so far, it's nice. Your meetings are well put together. You guys are well prepared. I enjoy logging in as soon as possible when I get done with other meetings, but really proud of you guys. Thank you for stepping up and putting it all together. So it looks nice. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown.
And I know I was the naysayer last year, and I told you, prove me wrong. And so far, it sounds like you are. So I appreciate it. You're coming back. You are making improvement. I'm speaking to you, the board, right? You're obviously doing a lot of work, the heavy lifting as the executive director, but you, the board, are making improvements. And so I'm happy to hear, and I'm hoping that we hear client feedback too, as you talk about the new flat irons, or whatever it was exactly that you called the flat tops.
Yeah.
As you talk about these improvements, I'd love to hear additional feedback from the community that you're serving. It's exciting to hear that we're entering into that SNAP program as a pilot. Obviously, the state of Washington wouldn't sink resources into something that saw as either high risk or failure prone. Mm-hmm. So again, I told you, prove me wrong and make me want to fund you in 6 months, and let's stay on this trajectory. I knew you could do it.
Thank you.
But I wanted to see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Roach. Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing me. I just want to say that in your report, you have a DPDA organizational assessment in there, and while I know not everything on this is yet to be achieved, but just to see the functional and the structural clarity that's starting to take place and form within the DPDA of maybe what has been accomplished, what is the DPDA, the foundation, what's going forward. I really appreciate seeing that clarity and that vision. I think it's something that we've really needed, and so just want to pay you the respect that under a lot of pressure that you've been able to produce, this level of clarity in a short amount of time. So appreciate that. Thank you for your comments. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I will just echo my fellow council members' comments that this looks like a great trajectory, and look forward to seeing more. It's all about the rubber hitting the road, and we're getting going. Thanks.
Councilmember Brown.
Last thing, I echo my fellow council members, but that idea of hearing from the stores is awesome. Mm-hmm. If we can hear more from them, I think that'll just tell a story that will probably blow us away.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me of that, Councilmember Brown and Mr. Serrano. I brought a kitchen client last week. Just wasn't the time, but he wanted to express that he's really excited about an aspect in the downtown master plan of outdoor dining, especially our kitchen clients in the windows think that's going to be huge for them. So that's a priority for us, and that's something Adam and I and Angela have talked about, is trying to get some outdoor seating for our kitchen clients, because that's a really big priority for them.
No, that's nice. No, again, I appreciate it. I thought, thanks to Pete, it was on my brain, but he did it, the magic. If we hear from them, I think that'll be really, really interesting to hear what they have to say. And just a plug, Director Darcy, I just think you're awesome. That's all I have. Thank you. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you. With no further comments from council members, I do want to say this report has greatly improved. I'm very impressed. Thank you again for the hard work that you are putting into this personally. I know this is your baby, and so you're addressing a lot of the concerns that we had. I do have one question though, in regards to, and this question is probably for Director Buckley. Just a small concern, just me maybe, on the 2 signers for the $5,000 threshold. Because of the history of issues that have happened prior to you, I would probably have you look at that again and maybe reduce the amount.
We can address that together.
That's just a concern of mine, because again, stuff that has happened in the past.
I understand.
Not to reflect on any of the work that you are doing or currently doing. So again, just for full transparency.
Thank you.
But again, appreciate all the work put into this, and looking forward to your outreach efforts.
Yes.
Thanks again. Any further questions or comments? City manager and interim city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. One thing that I think we wanted to try and get a little more clarity on is if the council's desire is to continue to have monthly in-person updates, or if it would be more acceptable to receive a written report essentially from Mr. Martinez as far as what the updates are and how things are progressing. Not leaning one way or the other, just wanted to pose that to council and see if there was any desire to change how we're doing things.
Absolutely. Councilman Campos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Interim City Manager Lincoln. I mean, so far we've received at least one other report that you provided. I think you provided reports even going back as far as November. Was my understanding is, that kind of met the requirement as far as to, give us a monthly update. But personally, just from my standpoint, it's nice seeing Director Martinez up here in person. Just a quick nitty gritty. The level of content here is great. Again, Director Martinez, I think the other council members, the narrative, right, is what narrative you're trying to drive. Your success on paper here, you're trending in the right direction, but, some narrative to illustrate how that change is impacting would be beneficial, and again, you don't answer to, but I'd like to know the challenges. If there's challenges or obstructions you're facing, you can share those. In my opinion, I think you can share those too, because I think, while the DPDA doesn't answer to the council, it seems as if we've given feedback or insight that's been beneficial in how to compensate or rectify some of those challenges or obstructions. Not to muddy the waters, but just me personally, it just seems like that would be a good opportunity. Again, to answer your question directly, Interim City Manager, I think it's nice to see Director Martinez here in person.
Yeah, Councilwoman Roach.
Director Martinez and Interim City Council, City Manager Lincoln, I would say that the decision that we made as a council, my opinion is that oversight of money in that first 6 months, so issuing that lump sum to DPDA, was with the idea of wanting to have transparency of how the money was being used, and have that monthly report. And so I am of the opinion that we continue to have these monthly presentations, because I want to see that through, and I'm getting great value from hearing what is happening and what's changing. So that's where I'm at.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, do you have any comment on this?
I think the report was requested by other council members. I have a number of ways we can get this done, so I'm on board for whatever council decides.
Councilman Brown.
I just concur. Seeing you and hearing you tells the whole story of what, again, I echo Councilwoman Roach. Seeing you and hearing you, when the story does come together completely, it looks and sounds nice, and it's right on where we want to be before the 6 months is up, I think. So I'm on board with seeing you and visiting with you once a month. Thank you.
With seeing no further comment from any of the other council members, I do want to say that I am in support of seeing you on a monthly basis for the first 6 months. We'll see how that goes, and hopefully you're not taking this as a being micromanaged. I guess this is to really connect with you, see and speak with you, and maybe hear what your needs are and how council can support and continue working with you. So I think Councilwoman Roach hit the nail on the head by saying what we had agreed on a few meetings ago. So for the time being, we'll move forward with what we had discussed. Thank you. Thanks again. Good night. So with no further questions, comments on this item, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item C, ordinance amending Pasco Municipal Code 25.127 zoning from Waterfront Development District to Mixed Use District. And again, Director White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, and I'll just turn this directly over to Emily Weimar from AHBL. She's the project applicant and proponent. But generally speaking, the mixed-use zoning district was applied for by AHBL. We have a comprehensive plan designation of mixed use, and this would in fact implement that comprehensive plan land use designation. Currently, we don't have a zoning district that would do that. So turn it over to Emily, and she has a presentation available for, here for council.
Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Emily Weimer. I'm with AHBL. I am a land use planner. Oh, there's my PowerPoint. AHBL is a local firm. We're located on Road 90 up in Pasco. So we do a lot of work in the community with the city. We are submitting this application on behalf of a developer, Elite Construction and Development. This is a proposed amendment to Chapter 25.127, which is your waterfront development district. And this proposal is to change the waterfront development district to rename it to a mixed-use district and modify it for a citywide applicability. So this is just a little timeline summary of what has occurred so far. And I will say that even before we submitted an application, we had extensive talks with city staff and with professional architects to kind of get the best text amendment available in front of you tonight. So there was a lot of work done over the past year to get this amendment ready. And we're very excited for it. And then a little bit of background. Your comprehensive plan has a land use designation for this mixed residential and commercial land use. But there is no corresponding zoning code. So this amendment would create that corresponding zoning code. And then my applicant in the future, if this goes through, would then have to apply for a rezone to get this district.
May I pause and ask you a question?
Sure.
The last time I recall this waterfront district coming to us, there was a different applicant, and it was James Sexton. Has there's been a transference, and who is the applicant? Am I accurate there in that?
I don't know what the original waterfront district was because that was specific to Osprey Point. My firm was involved at the very end with that, but this is a separate application, and it's been the same applicant the whole time.
Director White, you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you. The waterfront development district was initiated by the Port of Pasco, and this current zoning amendment, mixed-use zoning code, incorporates that into it as well as differentiates where it's appropriate or applicable.
So it includes what was previously presented to us by that other
Yes.
developer?
Yes.
Okay, I'm understanding now. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and for a little bit of background, we initially approached staff with creating an all-new district, but on staff's advice, we made an application to modify the existing zoning district instead of creating a new district. And so there are separate standards for what is known as Osprey Point, because they've had this zoning district for, I believe, 2 years already. That's a very small area, and the current code is tailored to that small geographic area. So we don't want to touch that. We've modified the code in a way that all these new regulations, which I will go over, do not apply to Osprey Point since it's such a small area and they are governed by the Port of Pasco development agreements already. So we wanted to make sure that the existing development is protected. So you will see two different standards, one in Osprey Point and one for everything else. And then everything else would apply citywide. I don't have a land use map, but the land use is citywide.
Yeah,
I don't know.
there's roughly less than 500 acres designated as mixed residential commercial in our comprehensive plan.
And my office is located in one of those, so we are right next to some vacant land that our developer is looking to develop. So we're very excited to see the opportunities on Road 90, especially. Here's just a quick overview of the changes that we proposed. We're adding some building design standards. And this is the section that we really got a lot of feedback from an architect consultant. So we're making sure these aren't overly burdensome on development, but they still manage to create an elevated product. And we added some screening standards, which were pretty similar to other screening standards that were in your code. We added a temporary business standards, which again are also very similar to other sections of your code. And the same as science standards. So we didn't completely reinvent some of these standards. We took it from other portions of your code and brought it over. And we revised the following sections: dimensional standards, building height, landscaping, and transportation design standards. Now, on the most part, the building's Osprey points, we are not proposing to change anything that would apply to them. So we're modifying it just for citywide applicability. And lastly, here's our proposed purpose statement of the new mixed-use district. I won't read it all, but in summary, we're hoping for a compatible and integrated mix of commercial and residential uses, and it's intended to provide a high level of diversity in housing types. So really, we developed this with flexibility in mind. We focus on new living opportunities, ones that are cohesive and pedestrian-oriented, and that have compatible neighborhood shops and stores. So we're very excited for this opportunity the new code might offer developments. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I hope that was enough of a high-level presentation for our purposes tonight. That's all the slides I prepared.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Do we have any questions or comments from council? Councilwoman Roach?
So looking at the purpose statement, it does talk about cohesive bike and pedestrian oriented community. But early on in that first sentence, it identifies office, residential, education, government, doesn't identify park spaces or open spaces. Is that intended to be part of this as well?
That is a great question. Let me pull up the ordinance and see. And I'm not sure how the city normally handles city parks, if they have their own zoning district.
No, city parks do not. They're permitted through special permit in residential zones. So we'll go through the details of the proposed mixed-use zoning district, and if it's not in there, we'll add that.
Add parks into it.
Yes, add the
Okay.
park development process, as it states. Actually, it's in, I'm trying to remember, I think it's 2586 in our zoning code now that talks about the special permit process for city recreation facilities.
Yeah, I would appreciate that being added in there, especially as we're kicking off the conversation of it being near to Osprey Point. I would think that some river access and public space would be included in this definition or purpose. I might have some more questions. I'll let others speak to it.
Thank you. Councilman Campos?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director White, do you have any intention to have the Planning Commission take a look at this before it comes back to us again? What's your thought process here? It seems to be, I remember working on Osprey Point when Councilwoman Roach and I were on Planning Commission. Is that, anything similar here that you would intend to do or not?
You return to the planning commission for a recommendation?
Just want to know what level of work has been, so this is went to the Planning Commission, it's come back for us to workshop?
Oh, yeah, the planning commission's considered it three different times.
Okay.
Any further questions? Councilman Serrano?
So I have a handful of comments. Some things seem a little overly prescriptive, limitations on pets. I think I find it a little odd and to see it, 3 cats or dogs. I can't remember exactly what it was, which I also, smaller houses, why would you want more than that? But that's not me. I have 0. But one thing that I noted, subsection 11 is fences and hedges. It cites Pasco Municipal Code 25.180. I don't recall, and I've got it up here and I've tried to review it. Is this going to be one of those line of sight issues that we're already seeking to potentially, revise that section of the code? And if so, why not implement the standard that we think prospectively might be beneficial to not only this section of town, but to the remainder of town? Let's look towards making this, whether it's a variance process or whether it's actually changing what that looks like. We've already had problems with fences, so let's not create more problems with new fences. And again, if we can try to solve the rest of the city through implementing, again, some type of variance process or whatever in this code that we think might be a citywide fit, let's get proactive and address that. So, I mean, I know it's a very nitpicky comment, but we've dealt with that issue a lot. So let's not have the same issues. I think I had some other handful of comments just looking at, block lengths, whether or not 600 feet is appropriate, limitations on cul-de-sacs, unless allowable by the CED, and I don't believe CED, is that still the accurate term? We may want to update that to whatever your job title is, Director White. So I mean, just again, some of these are very nitpicky, but let's make sure that the terminology is probably a bring forward from back when, but let's make sure we bring forward the right stuff. But again, I look at this and private streets, there are some limitations on that, and I know we've just adopted some things to allow for those in different parts of town. And I'm not saying that this is the one size fits all is appropriate, but I do think that when we're looking at potentially modifying what Pasco looks like, and especially looking at this from the waterfront, recognizing these are smaller footprint homes, multi-family dwellings, that type of thing, condos, apartments, what have you. Let's take a very precise look at how this might be the right solution to a lot of what Pasco may want to reflect if we're truly looking at urban infill. So I know those are very generic and high-level comments aside from those odd ones of changing terminology, and specifically, I do not want to see fence people come back. And that's not a shot at them, but I don't want to see, let me restate that. I don't want to see fencing issues come to us in this when we're writing a new code. And if we can adopt something that seems like it might be a variance for the rest of the city, let's really look at it. And even if it takes a little bit of extra time, let's get it right. And then say, hey, rest of the city, here's how we think it's right. So again, I think that's kind of a broad swath of comments to both staff and to you. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilwoman Roach.
I just wanted to ask a question about like maximum building height setbacks, and I know you said Planning Commission's seen this a few times, but seeing the application of maximum building height of 35 feet which is the residential amount for like an RS1, but wondering why, if it's a mixed residential commercial, why we're sticking to that height and not going to the commercial height if it's a mixed use. Is there any reasoning behind that? Or because as we were formally talking at a previous item, the right-of-way for Jubilee Foundation, just discussing that Pasco's in desperate need of housing, and this is a specifically mixed-use purpose, then why are we capping ourselves at an RS1 when we could be maximizing there?
The maximum we're proposing for multifamily is 90 feet. I'm sorry, I guess which maximum were you referring to?
Okay, so I see it in multifamily. It is in that same line item. It's on page 9, I guess, of the ordinance. Let's see, 25.127-9, then that's struck out and it's item 10. So it's Roman numeral 2. In our packets, page 12.
Oh, for Osprey Point.
So that's a yes.
Okay. Yeah, we did not really propose to change any of the Osprey Point provisions because that's outside our scope. Our developer is not interested in Osprey Point. That's more Port of Pasco's reign. So we didn't propose changing any of that existing code. And then I believe with discussions with staff, we came up with our recommended maximum heights for residential uses based on other allowable heights in your code. And that's something that we would certainly be supportive of raising if that's what council would like to see.
Well, and I might draw council's attention to page 10 of the ordinance at the very top, which identifies those heights. So you can see the commercial, office, education, and government uses in the blueprint, maximum of 85 feet. And then the residential use maximums right below that at 40 feet for detached, 45 feet for garden-style courtyard apartments, and maximum 90 feet for multifamily apartments.
I do see it. Thank you. And I guess I would still pose the same question for a mixed use area, mixed commercial, residential.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Roach, and the question was?
That why wouldn't we keep the consistency of commercial to residential in that area the same height maximum?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Jake Gonzalez, Planning Manager. We worked with Emily and the team at AHPL along with Director White, obviously, on this proposal, and I thought maybe it would clarify. We thought it was in the best interest to simplify our zoning code, particularly with the intent of what the Osprey Point Waterfront District intention was and the purpose statement of the overall creation of a mixed-use zoning district. A very similar intent, horizontal, vertical mixed-use products, diversity of housing types ranging from smaller detached single-family housing products to duplexes, triplexes, courtyard apartments, mid-rise units, etc., with a variety of commercial opportunities, civic spaces, government facilities, etc. And so that's why staff thought it was in the best interest to rename and modify the Waterfront Development District since the intent and the end result are very similar, to just create a citywide mixed-use district. And what Emily and the AHPL team have done is made sure not to modify the conditions and regulations under which Osprey Point was proposed. We did have conversations with Executive Director Randy Hayden at the Port of Pasco to ensure that was a concern of theirs, because theirs was done under the conditions and the context that their proposal was done on roughly 39.5 acres of a very constrained piece of property bound by the river, railroad tracks, A Street, etc. This, because of its applicability citywide, or at least under where the mixed residential commercial land use is available today under the comp plan designations, the intent was to apply much broader, but in a way more flexible standards, because it is going to be applicable citywide based on the land uses associated with it. So there are no modifications to the regulations that were developed specifically for Osprey Point, but there are new regulations, and you can see those underlined in blue in the ordinance for where this would apply under the proposed amendment that would apply citywide outside of Osprey Point.
That makes sense to me. I'm tracking you there. And so the difference with the residential is about 5 feet of a single or detached single unit is from 35 to 40. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we wanted to raise the thresholds, particularly to sort of get ahead of ourselves in a way, because we have the Planning Commission was very busy looking at residential design standards in 2021 and 2022. Also with the development of the Broadmoor Master Plan, which is I think the next item of tonight's agenda, where both the residential design standards code amendment, which was recommended by our Planning Commission in November 2022, and the proposed standards associated with Broadmoor both increase height limitations. They address and include flexibility to minimum lot sizes, minimum lot widths, frontages, etc. So we thought this was also an opportunity to make sure that this particular proposal would align with what's going on elsewhere, at least in limited cases with regards to the design standards update, which will be before you in about a month or two, and also the Broadmoor Master Plan, which needs that kind of development intensity to achieve the intended results of the Broadmoor area.
Thank you. I appreciate that reasoning behind it. And I guess if I don't want to belabor this because there's others who probably don't want to get into the nitty gritty of this. And I can ask further questions offline, excuse me. It's getting late. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Barajas. Yeah, I read through this. I sent some questions off to staff, a pretty significant list. I did get an initial response. I don't feel like all of it necessarily adequately addresses my questions and concerns. I think some of which are, to your point, Councilmember Roach, down in the nitty gritty, but I think really important to how this plays out. But one thing I'm struggling with a little bit on this is we have areas where clearly we're overlapping other sections of the code. If you go over to, if you jump over to, our C1 zone or a C3 zone or many of our zones, they link to other portions of the PMC as here's what dictates, setbacks, here's what dictates landscaping, etc. And this, we seem to recreate all of that. We even have a section here talking about basically itinerant vendors, which we have an entire section of our code that discusses that. And while I've raised my concerns to this council and to staff as to what's currently written, I'm confused on why we're each individual section of our code is like the new section here is growing pretty substantially, not just above and beyond what we're just prescribing in waterfront development, but in ways that are either potentially duplicative or potentially in conflict with other sections of our code that dictate these exact sort of things. So I've got a number of questions and concerns, and I'm looking for an adequate answer right now. I'm very supportive of the idea of a mixed use. I know we've had applications for areas that are planned as mixed use that are either going full commercial or full residential, and this, actually having a mixed use zone is essential, I think, for the continued growth of our city, and as Mr. Gonzalez said, the effective growth of our city into as we grow westward and northward. But I have strong concerns of how this is written and how we're approaching this. So I guess I'm looking for further dialogue on the questions I already asked staff before I'd be willing to support this as written. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments from council? So no further comments. Well, it seems there's more discussion that I'm sure you're going to be getting several emails from some of us just for further clarification on some of these. On the presentation itself. So further discussion, really, Director White, is what we're.
Well, Madam Mayor, we'll make sure we understand the concerns noted tonight, and then we'll reassess and return to council.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item D, update Broadmoor Master Plan and Environmental Impact Statement. And again, Director White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. And this obviously is a very substantial issue. The Broadmoor Master Plan has been in, I'm sort of ashamed to admit this, has been in some form or another since roughly 2004. We finally have completed a draft environmental impact statement and a master plan. As council knows, it's roughly 1,200 vacant acres, dead bullseye in the middle of a metro area adjacent to a freeway. Cities don't get an opportunity like this for clean slate development very often, if ever. Again, it's very important. So even though it's been in the works for some amount of time, the vision for Broadmoor has remained remarkably consistent through obviously different councils and different planning commissions. It's always been envisioned to be a pedestrian-friendly environment with choices for circulation and access, with a variety of mixed land uses. There has always been a preference towards higher density housing through higher density options, something we don't have a lot of here in Pasco. And there's always been an emphasis on the aesthetics of the Broadmoor area. And I don't want to leave this out, but it's also been, again, given its proximity to the freeway system, a place for significant job opportunities for residents, not just throughout Pasco, but particularly those that live in the Broadmoor area. So the master plan itself implements this vision by introducing development standards for residential, very similar to those that Mr. Gonzalez just mentioned, that you'll be hearing, I think, at the end of March at a council workshop, the residential design standards recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. There are standards relating to physical design of parking, public spaces, and building placement. There's an increased emphasis on mobility, especially leveraging the mixed-use sites with different modes of travel, including pedestrians and bicycles. And of course, like other major planning efforts, this master plan is not envisioned as the end product, but as something that will be amended over time to match the vision for Broadmoor and the council and community vision for the area. So the draft EIS, just to analyze two alternatives: the existing alternative, which is in conformance with our comprehensive plan, and then a higher growth alternative with more dense commercial and retail and residential development. The EIS is, in my view, very important to successfully implement the Broadmoor master plan. It contains specific mitigation measures, over 100 of them, mostly related to transportation, that have to be developed and used, because remember, we're implementing a dense urban development on vacant acres unserved by roads and, for the most part, utilities. This master plan, the Broadmoor master plan, is part of the city's 2022 cyclical comprehensive plan amendment process. Staff wanted to get these documents in front of council. You'll see them again once at a council workshop in mid-March, and again at I think the last council meeting in March. But given the volume of material present, we wanted to get this in front of council and let you know that you'll be seeing it again several times.
Perfect, thank you for that. Any questions or comments from council? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I have one, I guess, big question, if you can hear me. There we go, I am unmuted. Sorry, my apologies. It is after 12:30 right now, my local time, so I'm getting a little loopy. So my question, Director White and Mr. Gonzalez, is specifically around open spaces and parks. Every plan before this one, I've seen large parks and, swaths of open land in the center of this in various forms and fashions. And when I look at the proposed land use on this now, I see the open spaces continuing to dwindle, and I didn't see any major parks associated with this. Can you, I mean, obviously we have the Corps of Engineers land along the water, but that's not developable land anyway. So, and we've seen that partnership is a struggle for us across this entire community. So could you speak at all to how this will address open space and parkland?
Thank you, Councilmember Maloney. I can try to address that question. One of the errors and really the deficiencies in the current land use was that it prescribed an open space land use to portions of the Broadmoor planning area that in reality were not appropriate or even feasible for open space. And it felt sort of, the end result was it was green on a map, but in real life, it wouldn't actually turn out to be a park. And so that's what's really been, along with increasing or updating some of the other land use assumptions with the Broadmoor plan to comply with growth rates, et cetera, was updating where and how we actually implement and require open space, park recreational spaces, et cetera. I think outside of transportation, not only in the Broadmoor plan, but I think generally for planning items, access to park space and recreational opportunities is probably one of the second biggest topic and concern we get from community members. And particularly with regards to the comments associated with the draft EIS and the draft master plan, including comments from the Planning Commission. So what we've done was, rather than prescribe as what was done in the comprehensive plan and sort of the original Broadmoor planning effort, just kind of this might be a park and this could be a park, we actually took advantage of adopted plans and policies that the city already has in place, particularly the linkages, the River Shores and Linkages Plan, which predates, I think, a lot of staff actually, but has a lot of great concepts that we think would be applicable along our shoreline. We don't have a provision in the municipal code that requires an X amount of park space based on X amount of number of units or commercial spaces, et cetera. So right now we have to do a combination of the SEPA process and also using I think the detailed results of the mitigation measures associated with the draft EIS to ensure that when we do get a residential project that triggers the level of service concurrency that's part of our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, that is how we intend to get the necessary park space to ensure that it's at least compliant with the intent of Broadmoor, but certainly the concurrency standards associated with the latest iteration of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. You'll also notice that in the mixed zoning districts and under the mixed residential and commercial land uses, there's some additional provisions with regards to development and design standards that, based on the location or the proximity of a particular use or the proximity to a particular corridor, that certain public amenities, benches, public spaces, public plazas, things that generally don't count as a park on a map but function as a park to residents and businesses, that those would be a requirement. And we've tried to ensure that those are clearly indicated in the draft EIS as a necessary mitigation, and then identify those development or design standards in the concurrent master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for going through those details. I did note those features as well, and I applaud the concept of those, third spaces and non-traditional park and recreational type spaces that are, available to the public. I don't think it still addresses my concern and a number of community members' concerns about the lack of any large-scale parks in this area as part of our plan, and I would welcome further conversation about that. I believe that's been a comment that I know I've made about the parks plan as well, and I'm making it here in this one as well. I'm so far I have not found any relief from staff on my concern that there, and many people's concern that there is not, really we were talking about a community-sized park planned in any of our documents right now. So you can either take it as a comment to continue to work offline, but I can tell you that that will come up from me again, and I know it will come up from a number of community members. So I'm looking for an answer on that. Not necessarily tonight, if that's not the right venue, but I do expect a response from that from staff at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Is there any further questions, comments? Councilman Serrano?
I did notice that the concrete batch plan is projected through 2035. Do we know whether or not that's going to have any significant immediate impacts on, any particular businesses or uses surrounding it? And then, is that based on the existing permit or license or some sort of issue?
No, not particularly. The special permit for the mining expires in 2025, and I don't think the owner has much intention to trying to renew the lease, which also expires in 2025. But we've had several conversations with American Rock, and I'm convinced that having their presence there until their time expires is actually a giant benefit to the city for development of that site, because they're going to need rock material, and they have indicated that they're fine with that time frame. And Broadmoor's a 25-year plan, so I think we're in pretty good shape.
Okay, so no, I appreciate that context to basically feed ourselves kind of thing as we grow and we're able to. No, I appreciate that context, because initially the thought was, as Councilman or Mayor Potem Maloney indicated, I mean, that might be an ideal place to do some sort of feature like, waterfront park or something of that nature. You didn't say that directly, but the need for a park. But to know that we might be able to provide our own needs here locally, decreasing various environmental impacts, I think that could be tremendously beneficial. So thank you for sharing that insight.
Great. Any further questions or comments? Looks like there's no further questions or comments. Appreciate the context of the information, and this continues to be a discussion, as I can see. So we'll be hearing more of it. Thanks again. And with that, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item E, resolution rescinding an emergency proclamation. And Ms. Angela.
Yes, so good evening, Mayor and Council. So before you is a resolution to rescind the emergency proclamation that went into effect in March of 2020. In addition to the emergency proclamation, it would also rescind the remaining emergency orders that were tied to it. So originally we didn't tie the emergency proclamation to the state proclamation, so this just is a requirement for us to rescind those and end them. The remaining emergency orders also were not connected to any state order, so this is just a process to go through for that completion.
Okay. Do we have any questions, comments from council in regards to how we move forward with this? Mayor Potem Maloney, do you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, just one quick one. Is there any other emergency proclamations that we still have hanging out there? I'm fine with these going away, of course, but.
No, our legal team looked and they found all of them, and they are going to be completed once this resolution is approved.
Okay, perfect.
Excellent.
Sounds
Thank
good. Thank you. So we'll get that finalized. Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, item F. Ordinance amending Pasco Municipal Code Chapter 2.05, City Council related to Open Public Meetings Act updates. And Ms. Debbie.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Barajas and Council. This goes along with the rescinding the emergency proclamations. Again, with the COVID-19 pandemic, things were changed, and part of that was the Open Public Meetings Act, or OPMA. And so we had a discussion in September talking about some of the items that were required from the OPMA. The main one was remote meeting attendance by members of a legislative body. And so at that September meeting, Council discussed the requirements of how and when they would be able to attend remotely. And out of that, they just wanted to have that discretion on their own, and from that, then we would have that council member who would be attending remotely notify the mayor and the city manager of their virtual attendance. And then there was the issue about the audio via telephone or some other electronic device, that communications could be heard and that we could hear the person remotely, as well as them hearing the discussion. And another piece of it was at the presiding officer's discretion, in your case, the mayor. A roll call vote may be enacted for any of the motions during the meeting when a council member is attending remotely. It's not a requirement, but it's an option for you. And then lastly, the remote meeting attendance option may also be extended to the city boards and commissions. And then while we were adjusting and making those required amendments, we did add in 2 more items. One being what happens when the mayor and the mayor pro tem are absent, or there is no mayor and mayor pro tem elected at the time, who that presiding officer would be and how that process, as well as adding in the regular workshop meeting agenda information. So if you have any questions, both city attorney and I are here to answer them. Otherwise, if there's none, we're planning on bringing it back at the next regular meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any questions, comments from council? Any questions, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
No questions. I appreciate the opportunity to attend remotely and appreciate your tolerance for me. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll look forward to seeing that one at the next regular meeting. Last one, Director Worley. Gotta wrap it up, sir. Item G. With all respect to. Item G, Resolution, Washington State Department of Ecology Agreement for Pasco Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project Phase 2. Director Willie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. The information's in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That was very quick. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from council members in regards to this item on the agenda? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, any questions or comments in particular to this item on the agenda?
Nope, I read it. No questions. Thank you.
There we go. So seeing no comment or questions on this, we will wrap this one up at our next meeting, correct? Correct. Got it. Thank you. All right. Well, item 6 on the agenda is miscellaneous council discussion. None from interim city manager. Councilwoman Roach.
I just have one thing. We do not need to talk about it now, but one of the questions I was asked by a Pasco resident was, is Peanuts Park an available park for rental? And if you go to the website in Pasco Parks, it's not listed as one. There's a number of hatches and different areas. And so they asked me why not, and I did not have an answer. So maybe that is something I could get offline if we could talk about if that is an available park for rental. What's that?
To the group.
Or to the group? Okay, it
Not
sounds,
necessarily tonight, but.
right. Yeah, it's not a tonight answer, that's for sure, but just a curiosity if that's something that can be done, or if not, why? Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any further questions, comments? All right, so item number 7, executive session. None listed. Thank you very much. And with that, it is now 9:49 and we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for joining us.